guys, in this episode I'm going to talk a lot about what it was like growing up on a farm in Kansas and the experiences that I got, the things that I learned, and how I think some of those times really formed and shaped who I became. So this is fun for me. I'm literally sitting on my back porch on Sunday morning, drinking a cup of coffee, and recording this episode. Elizabeth's asleep upstairs because, it's a rule in the house that she, likes to sleep in on the weekends. But I get to work if she's sleeping, so sometimes I may let her sleep in a little bit longer than she might want to. But, it's the best way for me to get work done. That way we can spend some time together and we're not just, staring at our phones and, not talking to each other. But it's also summertime in Texas in July, so I bet I won't sit out here for very long before this heat kicks up and kicks my ass a little bit. But I also, I live on a small farm, so you might hear a rooster or birds in the background. You know what? That's just farm life. So hopefully you'll get to hear Loki and, I call him Ron from Harry Potter, but Elizabeth had another name for him. But he's a ginger rooster, but two gorgeous roosters. So, but I don't remember the year it was when my family moved to Kansas, and I don't remember a whole lot of my time before we got there. But I do know it was a whirlwind of moves and different locations. Mom and Dad were young. They were, they had Scott, my oldest brother, when my mom was 18 years old. And I think they were both probably just running from their families and the way they grew up. And they found each other. And it's been a beautiful thing for 46, going on 47 years. Awesome marriage for their life. It's, I think their tenacity to stay with each other through the thick, the thin, the good times, and the bullshit has really taught me the ability to go through the shit sometimes Elizabeth and I go through, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Elizabeth and I don't fight. We have a pretty badass relationship, but I think Mom and Dad's there's a song, a country song called Two Sparrows in a Hurricane that completely represent my parents' life. If you want to just go hear a good song that absolutely represents what they went through, what they've survived in almost 47 years of marriage, that song does it. But we moved to Kansas when I was 5 years old. And we moved in with a family, I believe, at the time. And it was just one of those situations, I think, Mom, Dad, like I said, were trying to find themselves. But up until that point, the best I can recall, we hadn't really grown up in the country like area. Now, Mom grew up on farms when she was a little girl. My dad grew up in farms when he was a little guy. Both kind of had these family land that they'd grown up on. So I think there was this desire/need to get us boys to experience kind of that country lifestyle. And the small town vibe, and the little town that we grew up in Kansas is called Wellsville, and you can try and find it on a map, but it is a tiny, tiny town. I mean, to give you an example, when we left, the graduating class was like 23 students. Kindergarten through 12th grade were all in one building, and it was just tiny. It really one stoplight, one drugstore, one restaurant, one retail type store, just your run-of-the-mill American small city. And, the first house that I remember us renting was out off these country roads, a little one-story house with a couple of barns on it. And this house was I believe a two-bedroom. I know Mom and Dad are going to hear this episode and give me hell because I'm going to probably screw up a lot of these facts. But it was a two-bedroom, and it might have been three. But I know for sure Keith and I shared a bedroom. Scott may have had his own bedroom, but it was tiny. And in Kansas, the winters get pretty freaking brutal. Nothing like I get here in Texas. But I remember one winter in that house, and Mom's gonna kill me for this story, but all of our pipes froze, and I don't remember how we got water, but we weren't getting water, and we weren't able to get hot water in the house. And so Mom was boiling water on the stove to make baths for us all. And basically it was going to be one bath for the whole family. That we had to get clean somehow, and we were far from having a ton of money, but I remember Mom filling the bathtub with these pots of waters off the stove that she'd been heating up, and everybody was going to have to use this bath water to get clean, and I was the first up. Now mind you, at this point I'm probably 6-7 years old when we're going through this, and I'm the first one in the bathtub. And you know what happens to a guy when his Pepe hits hot water. So yeah, everybody's supposed to use this bathtub to get clean, and I'm the first one in and end up peeing in the water. Mom walks in as I'm peeing in this bathtub, and she's like, "Really?" Because everybody's got to use it, so they had to drain the bathtub. It started all over again, but you're a little boy. Hot water makes you pee, so it's just what happens. So that farm is when I remember getting my first horse, and it was a little pony named Brownie. And Brownie was just a badass little pony. We had joined 4-H, which is a farm area country group that teaches kids everything from arts and crafts to working with animals, and it's a fantastic way to bring your kids up. To get exposed and experience in a lot of different trades, and they have camps, and it's just a really, really, really cool thing. And one of the things that I miss as a kid when we had the horses is during the summertime, we would go out with a bunch of other families and go tent camping and take the horses out there. And I don't know where this park was that we went to. I guarantee Mom and Dad can name it off the top of their head. But we would jump on the horses and we'd go ride all of these trails from horseback. And it was awesome. And then, of course, the guys, the parents, the adults would, drink, because that's what you do when you have horses and camping, is you drink. And they would go tear off on these horses, through these trails at top speed. Well, Brownie was such a badass, my pony, that my older brother Scott jumped on the pony one point, and they went tearing through the trails. And this is full-on top-speed horses running through trails. Not safe at all. But my oldest brother was able to race Brownie against these full-grown horses, and he stayed in the second position all through those trails. I mean, So I'll give you an idea. That pony was badass. And there's a ton of stories from those trips, but the other thing I remember is Shelley Wright, who's a country western singer. She's got a couple of songs that really broke through, which was Single White Female, See a Cowboy Hats. She grew up in that small town with us, and I can remember sitting around the campfires hearing her sing, and her dad sing on her bus. It was everything you'd hope to find in small town country farmland, of pickup trucks, horses, fires, beer, guitars. I mean, it was the picture as just cool upbringing. It was a truly cool way for a family who didn't have a whole lot of money to get their kids exposed to, a culture, a lifestyle. Somewhere along the way, we moved into the big house in Kansas, and I call it the big house because it was a 2-story country, farmhouse on, I don't know, I think it was, and I think the family always argues about this, somewhere around a 500-acre farmhouse out there. And I remember it had a couple of barns and a garage, and man, we just had land. I just remember so much land. We had a couple of ponds on the property that we'd ice skate on in the winter. I mean, that's how cool and crazy and cold it got for us. I live in Texas now, so the thoughts of skating on a pond, ice skating on a pond, is mind-blowing because it never gets cold enough here that you can pull something like that off. But, man, I can remember jumping on the horses and going riding the back acres, fishing in the ponds, and, we had a huge creek that ran the property. Not a huge creek. I mean, we just had a creek that ran the property called the Magazine River. Don't ask me how to spell it. Find it on a map. But that ran the whole property line, and we've got stories of pulling john boats down the creek and fishing, and there's actually one story that there's water moccasins down there all the time, and we saw a water moccasin one day that was carrying a crappie in its mouth, and a crappie is a type of small fish, and the crappie had a crawdad in its mouth, so it was like the full food chain in one fell swoop, and which we ultimately won because you see a water moccasin, you kill a water moccasin. So but yeah, so a water moccasin had a crappie had a crawdad, and all 3 of them died once we saw them, because water moccasins are highly poisonous and they're aggressive. But it may have been that time when we joined a local ratio, and a ratio is a small arena where they do rodeo-like activities. So things, if you've ever been to a rodeo and you've seen maybe barrel racing, pole bending, and activities like that, that's what they do. But kids get to participate and grow up. So, we got other horses, and my favorite horse that I got growing up was an Appaloosa. And an Appaloosa is a breed of horse that's just gorgeous. I love Appies. But this one was gray and white. And Appaloosas have a very distinctive kind of like a dot pattern on their back, on their ass end. And Apache was the name of my Appaloosa, and just an awesome horse. And, we, as part of 4-H, as part of the ratio, we would show our horses, in arenas and doing different activities. And, and I don't remember how it all went, but you'd have to walk your horse so far, trot your horse, which is a small jog so far, and you get to do these different things. Well, imagine being a kid somewhere between the ages of 6 and 9 probably, and you're dressed up in your best country attire. So you got your boots on, your straw hat that's probably a hand-me-down, a shirt that's a hand-me-down. And back then, to get the big feathers on the front of your hat, to where almost like the whole front of your hat is covered in some sort of bird feathers, was like the cool thing to do. So get this image in your head of a tiny runt of a kid wearing a cowboy hat, probably a flannel shirt, blue jeans that probably didn't fit just right because I'm sure they were hand-me-downs from my brothers. And I'm in an arena with probably 10 or 12 other kids. And you take turns showing your horses doing this walk and trot and take them in a certain circuit. Now imagine, the stands are filled with parents and, brothers and friends and other people just watching this, because you win trophies and ribbons for being the best in show for these events. And so imagine if I'm taking Apache and you're running her through the arena to do all these different things you're supposed to do, and she does what Apache was famous for, which is this sneezing, farting thing. She would literally start sneezing and then start farting at the same time. But it wasn't just that. She'd sneeze, her head would go forward, her feet would kind of kick up, and she'd fart at the same time. So here I am, being a little kid, trying to win these awards, win these prizes, win this, competition, in the middle of this arena with all the friends, families, and everything else around, and my damn Appaloosa Apache is sneezing and farting, and she does it like 6-7 times in a row. You can't just do it once. No, it's like several times. I really just did that on this podcast. I made that noise, so that's just for you guys. I hope you enjoy that. But yeah, it was funny. It was embarrassing. It was crazy. Just a good time. But on that 2-story farmhouse, I can just remember jumping on the horses and going out to the back acres. They call it the back 40. And I don't know why they call things the back 40, but that's always the back side of your farm for some reason. And I remember the cold winters. I remember the bikes we had that were I had a favorite bike growing up. Most of our bikes we had growing up were pieced together bikes from several different things, or several other bikes. But I remember one Christmas, I got the coolest bike ever. And it was a new bike, which is like unheard of, at that point in our lives. But I remember I got a bike that was the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard. So it had all this plastic, stuff on the bike. And I just remember thinking that bike was so fast because it was the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard. So it had to be fast. You can't have all of that decoration and decals on your bike without being super fast. But, typical boys, we'd make ramps and jump things that we shouldn't jump. And my oldest brother was freaking Evel Knievel and crazy as hell. To this day, he's still that way. I mean, you put him on a bike or something with a motor, and all he knows is balls to the wall. And just nuts. I'll leave that story for another day. But there's a story about him and our cousin, raced motocross professionally as a kid and did really, really well. But there was a particular race where my brother beat him and had never professionally raced in his life. But, I digress. But it was just a cool time, cool way as a kid growing up. Now, even though we had a 2-story house and we had this 500-acre farm, we were nowhere near wealthy. The house was a rental. The land wasn't ours. We just had access to it all. And I think there was a trade-off of taking care of the land and cattle as part of taking care of the house. But it gave us a cool way to, live life. That's the first train layout that I remember my dad building in the shed back behind the house. And it was funny as we had a discussion with my oldest brother and I that he doesn't remember that train layout, but I do. You walked out the back door of the 2-story house, and there was a small sidewalk that took you into a white shed. And I just remember going in there and Dad working on his train layouts. And he still does. And I love his trains. I bust his chops over them because he's an adult playing with toys. But Dad and his trains have been a pivotal point in my life, my entire journey. I really don't remember a time of Dad not having trains and building layouts and just geeking out over his electronics and things and tinkering. So it's been a cool thing to have in my life. And even though to this day we bust his chops over his trains, and give him a hard time about you're an adult who plays with toys, trains, and we're notorious for going in there and causing train wrecks and flipping over cars and buildings and stuff on his layouts. But man, he loves it. He loves playing with those trains, and it really is awesome. But Dad, just so you know, I'm still going to continue to bust your chops because I know you're going to listen to this episode. And I'll tell you what, guys, as I digress again, but Mom and Dad listen to all these, and that's what's fun. Is Mom is every episode that I have, the recordings, ones I do myself. Mom gives me great advice on what I should do, and she's out constantly telling me to quit cussing. Well, I'm not, Mom. You're welcome. But it's fun to have that kind of support. But what's the whole point of me telling you how we grew up in the country like that? Is it's amazing how you return to your roots. It was around 11 years old when, because it was 1989, when we moved from Kansas to Texas. And we went from small town living to suburbia life. When we lived in Kansas, our closest neighbor was about a mile away. So if you were going to hang out with somebody, the town was so small, the area was so small that you only had to punch in the last 4 numbers. And when I say punch in, let me clarify. This had been a rotary phone or a home phone where you punched in the numbers to dial whoever you were trying to get to. And you only had to remember the last 4 digits of their number because you didn't need area codes, you didn't need the first 3, so you typed in the last 4 digits. And it was a community line. So if you picked it up, you're liable to have and hear a neighbor talking to their neighbor, and you constantly would be in conversations with other people and hear their conversation. It's wild. But that gives you an idea of how far back this was that, we grew up, living that lifestyle. So we moved to Texas, and we go from country living to suburbia life. We'd sold all the horses, we sold all the farm animals, but we still had the farm clothes, we still had the farm, hairstyles. We did not fit in when we first moved here. Far from it, and I think that's where I got into my fights and stuff. Was just, I was a farm kid. I didn't know how to hang out with these suburban, people. Eventually figured it out, I think. But, we stayed in suburban lifestyle for a long while. And, when I went to the Marine Corps, as I've talked about in other episodes, you get everybody slammed into one unit from 50 different states, and you hang out with everybody, but you kind of get some really close friends. And the guys I ended up really hanging out with were all the country guys. So I had guys from Georgia, West Virginia, guys from upstate New York, and upstate New York is country. Guys from Louisiana. There was one guy, and I'll always talk about him, that hung out with us. When that was Jersey Mike. One of the few city boys that now he grew up in the suburbs of Jersey, but one of the few city guys that hung out with us. But these guys that I ended up hanging out with were, to give you an example, is when we go to Manhattan, we go visit Jersey Mike. We all go and show up. Two of the guys, Jimmy and Chris, are walking through downtown Manhattan in bibs overalls. Here you are in the biggest city in the world, with some of the wealthiest people in the world, and we're just walking down the streets, with a couple of Italian guys, and Jimmy and Chris are in bib overalls. I mean, but New York, nothing sticks out. So, but I look back on that going, really? They walked through Manhattan in bib overalls. I'm not sure I'd pull that one off. But, even when I went to the Marine Corps, I fell back into the country lifestyle. Not country living, because we stayed in barracks or Quonset huts or whatnot. But I hung out with the country folk, people that just grew up in that lifestyle. And my stories were always stories of being a kid. I didn't have, of course, the countryside. I mean, a lot of these guys grew up country. And dude, let me tell you, the folks from West Virginia, that's country. The folks from Georgia's country, but West Virginia, that's country, man. But after the Marine Corps, for me it was a series of big city living to suburbia life, and never. I mean, didn't understand at the time, but looking back, I just didn't seem to fit in with that lifestyle. I really thought success in life was big city living. You live in the condos downtown. You drive the fancy cars. You wear the fancy suits and clothes, and that was success. That was living. And as I got close to that world and that lifestyle, it just never fit right. It just never felt like that was where I needed to be. That's where I needed. That's how I needed to live. Between living in Texas and then living in St. Louis and coming back to Texas, that journey was a series of mishaps, mistakes, screw-ups, substance abuse, everything as I went about that ride. And then I met Elizabeth, and Elizabeth grew up her entire time in suburbia life, but she's always had animals in her life. And it's interesting to think about it and look back on it and know that somehow, and I'm sure not everybody does this, but somehow you end up going back to your roots. They really, those young years of your life really shape the trajectory of your life, and I say this to say because I've had some guests on this podcast that had some very tragic childhoods, from physical and sexual abuse to foster homes, and just some tough ways to grow up. And those life experiences have absolutely influenced their lives. I have a really, really close friend right now that's him and his wife and their daughter have taken on their first foster kids, but that's because his wife, grew up in a foster household and is giving back, which is just a beautiful thing. Whatever you go through as a kid becomes part of your story, but it becomes part of your who you are, and your story is your strength. The things you've gone through, the things you've done, that is your superpower. And the more you own that, and the more you embrace that, I hope you guys can hear the roosters in the background. The more you embrace that, the more you will find what you're looking for. It's the people that hide that away and bury that story, that struggle, and I can speak the truth to that, is throughout my career, whenever I was in a corporate-like setting, I didn't talk about the country living. I didn't talk about the country life. And that comes back to when I was working in St. Louis, and that executive told me, don't tell people you're a veteran. Don't tell people, don't lose all the twang. I couldn't say y'all and things like that. And that taught me in the corporate environment that the country guy, isn't going to be successful, because, to be successful, you have got to be the prim and proper, I'll say it, prim and proper white person. That's the picturesque thing, and it's such bullshit. It is so fucking stupid to think that you've got to fit a certain mold, a certain look and feel, and that's why I love the time we're living in right now, because the internet's the equalizer, man, of everything. Because the internet doesn't freaking care what you look like, where you come from, your story, your gender, race. It doesn't give a shit about anything. It's a damn, machine robot that doesn't think. And anybody can find success, and there's no barrier to entry other than having internet access and some sort of device that will get you on there. I freaking love that. It is completely leveled the playing field where anybody can find success. And the reason I say anybody, because you can even get access to a computer from your local library, and build a business from there. So it's awesome. It's awesome. But if people don't share their story of where they came from, and they hide that portion of their life, then it's really hard to be authentic and put your authentic version of you out into the marketplace, because you're so worried that people will find out about your deep, dark secrets. You're so consumed with how other people see you, or have this perception of you, and you get really, really self-conscious, because I know I did it. I love to tell people about the successes and the wins in my life, and the accounts I won from sales, and the successes I had in St. Louis and my careers. When I sat down, especially in a business conversation with somebody, I had the story down of all the successes in life, the wins in life, the things I accomplished, and I could prove to somebody I was badass and awesome in a very short amount of time, tell them about all the great things that had happened in my life. Um, but it was all a mask to cover up who I really was, sharing my lifestyle and sharing my journey. And as I've gotten older, and I've begun to really share my story and tell my journey, um, uh, it's amazing how much that's brought out the authenticity of me to uh, be able to get genuine with people. Sales got easier because you were really just having great conversations with people. And for me, I wanted to hear their stories. I wanted to hear what they were doing. I wanted to hear where they came from. I wanted to hear, about their journey. And then people wanted to hear about mine. I mean, when you're real with people, and authentic, they get real and authentic with you. It's a beautiful thing. And for some people, that have the super tragic growing up, which I obviously don't. But the people that have the super tragic, upbringing, and if you can find the courage to share that story, I promise you that you'll help somebody else that is going through that. I mean, it's therapeutic on both sides, because you're willing to just put yourself out there. So contemplate it. That's your call. But man, sharing your story is it's freeing, man. It helps you, beat back the gremlin that's been whooping your ass for so many years. And it allows you to start living the life that you wanted to live. And let's bring it full circle. Now, gosh, 35 years later, 34 years later, 33, somewhere in there, years later, I'm back to living on a farm. Now, here's the cool thing. Is every house we lived in Kansas was either owned by family or we rented. All the land we lived on was owned by somebody else. Here I am, 41 years old, living on my own land, my own house, 2 houses on the property, and we've got ducks, chickens, goats, rabbits, dogs, cats. We're looking at buying a little bit more land around us just to expand the acreage. I've got a creek that runs the property. Life has a funny way of coming back, and now I'm back to country living. I'm back to living in a small town with 1 stoplight in Azle, Texas, and you go to the local restaurants, and I'm liable to run into my parents and brothers and brothers with family, because they all live out here too. You go back and my nieces are in high school, and you go watch the high school football games, and then as a kid I hated going to the high school football game. My brother played, but I was forced to sit in the stands, and I didn't care about football. It sucked. But now I love going to the games. I'm an adult, and I get to cheer on the hometown team and watch my nieces, one march in the band, the other one in the color guard, and it's cool. It's simple. It's relaxing. I mean, I'll go back to how I started this. I'm sitting on my back porch on a Sunday morning, drinking a cup of coffee, recording this, just sharing my journey, sharing my story, how I got here, roosters crowing in the background, and it's just peace, man. It's just simple serenity. So embrace your story. Embrace the things that you've been hiding your entire life, because as you get okay with whatever you've been through, life gets easier. It's when you dwell on the things that happen to you as you grow up that life gets real tough and life gets real hard. Because when you start dwelling, you start reliving. And let me tell you, life doesn't move when you're looking backwards. Life doesn't grow and life doesn't thrive when you're constantly looking backwards at what happened to you. It's just a part of your journey. It's just a part of your story. Share it. Embrace it. Own it. It's what makes you you. And it really is your superpower. If you'll stop looking at what happened to you growing up, and I know it, guys, I know some of you have been through some shit that I'll never be able to understand. And I'm sorry that you went through whatever you went through. But if you'll use that as your strength, and you use that, turn that into your superpower, life gets easier. It will help you break free from the demons that have been whooping your ass for years. It'll help you embrace who you need to become to find the success that you're looking for. But only if you're willing to get authentic with yourself first. You get authentic with yourself, then you can get authentic with other people. You know, I love the phrase that you've got to love yourself first before love will walk into your life, and it's true. But if that story of whatever you went through growing up still kicks your ass, then it's holding you back from the peace and the joy that you could be experiencing. I mean, think about times when you could be enjoying your family and the conversations going on, but in your head you're reliving the childhood you went through, and all you can worry about is what somebody is saying or doing is reminding you of things that happened in your childhood. You know, or are making you self-conscious because you think a statement or a conversation being directed at you. Man, just be you. Own you. Be authentically you. And watch the world show up in a peaceful way. As you go through your journey, man, start living. Go look back at the good times of when you grow up. And the good times for me always involve family. They always involved the country life. They always involved, you know, just some aspect of togetherness. And that's my story. That's my journey. And life for me has come full circle back to living on the farm and sharing that with you guys, because that's part of me just putting my authentic self out. Is even as a sales guy, even when I bought this place, I kind of kept it under wraps. I didn't want to tell people I lived on a farm because I didn't, you know, once again, my demons of don't tell people you live in the country, don't tell people you live on a farm, you know, were coming back and bite me in the ass. That gremlin was sitting on my shoulder, saying, if you tell people you live on a farm, they're going to lose respect for you. Well, fuck off, gremlin. This is my life. This is my journey. Embrace who you are. Embrace your story. And life gets easier. Life gets simpler. So I hope that me just sharing another tidbit about my life and my journey has helped you embrace who you are and embrace what you've been through, because your story is your strength. And it's a beautiful thing. keep running, guys. I'm really glad to get to share my time with you, and I'm glad you get to tune in and listen to me flap my gums. It means a lot to me. If you could do me a favor, is wherever you listen to this to, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, Castbox, if you could do me such a great honor, and if this show has helped you out in any way, if you could leave a comment, if you could leave a rating, if you could share it with your friends, that would mean everything to me. If an episode impacts you, whether it's my story or somebody else, send me a message. Send me an email at Donnie@DonnieBoivin.com. So I can get that message back to the people who's sharing their stories and let them know how much you impacted them. That's a beautiful thing. I'm going to continue bringing some powerhouse stories out here to inspire and get people to share their journeys as they go through. So I really think that it's helping people deal with whatever mess they're going through or whatever mess they've been through as they go about their journey. And if you'd like to get on the mailing list for this podcast, there's links I'll get out there, and they'll be in the show notes for this, that you could sign up to be there. And then every Sunday morning I send out an email with the 5 episodes that went out this week with a short story that goes with them. So in case you want to listen to a story every day on your commute to work, you'll get a culmination of all the episodes come out to you, so that you can get to these shows and hear all these great stories from all these great people. And then there's a Facebook group as well called Success Champions, where we talk about the shows. I bring on some of the followers doing lives, do some motivations. I'm checking in to see what you're doing. And it's just a place where we all can come together and have some great conversations. So you can check that out as well. But guys, run like hell, chase your dreams, do what you love, and just have a lot of fun in life. We'll talk soon. Later.